The raptured multitude in Revelation 7:9 through 14 is said to have come out of the Great Tribulation, not the wrath. And this distinction, I believe, is crucial. Now notice, in this verse, according to the Prewrath model, at the time when John's writing and describing the sixth seal, in the sequence of what's going on in his story here, let me bring up a chart so you can see what I'm talking about. So here we've got the seals, and down here at the bottom, we've got the sixth seal, which corresponds to this rapture up here, the coming of the Son of Man, date unknown. But notice it separates the Great Tribulation from the Day of the Lord activities. And so it's the sixth seal in John's story that signals the imminent rapture that's about to take place. Only after, not before then. However, according to post-tribbers, even though they believe that there's a rapture after the tribulation of those days, going back to my chart here, when they describe a rapture after the tribulation, which by definition should be Great Tribulation, the classic version of post-tribulation also conflates the word tribulation with wrath of God. Remember, going back to my chart here, looking at, here we go, Posttrib, they just have God's wrath cutting across the entire 70th week of Daniel with a rapture at the far end. And even though they call themselves post-tribulation, honestly, their wrath and tribulation have overlapped to one another in the second 3.5 years, which means they're actually also post-wrath rapture. So if that's true, going back to what I'm complaining about here in their model, they don't make this distinction between trib and wrath. And indeed, when John asks the elder in Revelation 7:9 through 14, let's just go to it so you can see it. All right, let's go to the very next chapter here. I'm using Blue Letter Bible more lately. I love this tool. I still like the other tool that I normally use, but lately I've been using Blue Letter Bible a lot. In Revelation 7, starting in verse 9, there's this great multitude that John sees, right? This is what he says right there. After these things I looked and behold a great multitude. So he's seeing this multitude in heaven. I believe this is the raptured church. When I say church here, I mean every believer that has ever existed that is definitionally belongs to the church. This means Old Testament saints. This means New Testament saints. This means everybody at this point in time at the time of the rapture, which means for a very brief moment on planet Earth, there are no believers. Unless you want to count the 144,000 that we just read about that were sealed as believers, but there's a good case that could be made that they are not believers. They've simply been sealed, and that they've been sealed to be protected from Antichrist's persecution, and yet they're not in a saving relationship with Yeshua just yet. But they will by the time we read about them again in Revelation chapter 14. But I digress. Let's talk about this group in chapter 7 here. John asks this elder, who are they? And when we get to verse 14, John is told by the elder, these are the ones who come out of the Great Tribulation, and they've washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. So in a limited sense, they're the ones that come out of Great Tribulation, but there's no reason to believe that they do not include everyone who died prior to the tribulation time period. So this would be the Apostle Paul, right? He went through tribulation in his day, but he didn't go through what Jesus called the Great Tribulation proper. He didn't go through the time period that's still yet future. So this means that John is seeing, this is kind of a weird realization if you take it to an extreme. John is looking at himself in there. Right? If John is one of the saints that died prior to the 70th week of Daniel, but then John is definitely a believer in Jesus and got he didn't get raptured, but he got resurrected. When the rapture took place, the resurrection took place first. Remember, resurrection first and rapture, two events, simultaneous occurrence, resurrection then rapture. Well, then this group that John's looking at is actually, he's in that group. It's just he doesn't recognize him. He doesn't recognize himself. I've heard some objection saying, well, how can John not recognize who these people is? He's surely going to see people that he knows from his day. Well, remember, John says it's a multitude that no man can count. And John seems to be able to count, right? Earlier, he's counted like 10,000 times 10,000, right? Earlier in his book, he talks about how many angels are standing around the throne and things like that. He seems to know how to count. But now, he says, no man can count, right? He's like, this is an uncountable group. Point is, they're standing in heaven on the sea of glass. We're going to read about that later on. But they are clothed in white robes. I believe they have bodies. They're holding palm branches, I believe. If it's not in here, it's in another passage where they're holding the palm branches. But the point is, they come out of the Great Tribulation. There's even a definite article in front of Great Tribulation. And this is a term that Yeshua has used already in his Olivet Discourse. So going back to my study, the post-tribbers say that the rapture is after the tribulation per Matthew 29, Matthew 24:29. I agree with that. The rapture is post-trib, post-great trib, to be sure. But if, according to the post-tribbers, the rapture is also post-wrath, then shouldn't John have said, these are they who have come out of God's wrath? But he doesn't say that. Remember, these are Jesus' words being given to John. The angel, the elder speaking to John says, these are ones who came out of great tribulation, not come out of wrath of God. So that's a distinction I'm trying to notice. Again, it sounds like I'm nitpicking, but I don't believe I am. So let's keep reading some basic problems. Basic post-trib problems that I have identified. This is more or less a more meaty part of my study, so I'm slowing down a little bit. I decided to ask some questions to the post-tribbers. If wrath has just now arrived in Revelation 6, then the previous seal judgments are not God's wrath, but satanic tribulation, per Revelation 6, 1 through 11. The logic is, so let me go back over to the slide I was looking at earlier. Here, we've got all these seals down here at the bottom of this section. And these seals are represented as existing on the outside of the seven-sealed scroll. I take this picture given by Yeshua of a scroll as the contents being the wrath of God on the inside of the scroll, the trumpets and the bowls. Indeed, the bowls are a separate little book inside of the larger scroll, so there's a scroll within a scroll. The outside of the scroll is sealed off by these seven seals, which is representative. You know what? I've got a picture of this. Let me just pull up the images. Where are the seven? Where's the scroll? Give me a moment here. May as well just show you what I'm talking about right now rather than waiting till post-production. Seven sealed scroll. Seven. Okay. I suppose this one can work. So we've got this picture here. This is a scroll. And notice that all the seals are on the outside, seven of them, and you can't open the scroll without breaking the seals. So I take the seven seals as preconditions that exist before the scroll can be opened. I thought I had another version. We suppose we could look at this. You see seven seals, and then trumpets, and then bowls. I can't, for some reason, I used to be able to move this over, but it's not moving now. Give me a second. Let me try it this way. That's what I was missing. All right, so you see seven seals that give rise to seven trumpets, with which then the seventh seal introduces the seven trumpets, and the seventh trumpet itself introduces the seven bowls. But the point is that the seals are preventing anyone from accessing the content of the scroll itself till you break all the seals. So going back to my study here, if John records in Revelation 6 at the statement of the earth dwellers, "Fall on us and hide us from the wrath of the Lamb and him that sits on the throne, for the great day of their wrath has arrived." if this is the first time that wrath shows up in the book of Revelation, which it is, then the previous seal judgments are not God's wrath. This is a discussion. This is a point of disagreement with the pre-tribbers also. They think that the seals are God's wrath. So when we go back over to the image I was looking at earlier, let me pull it up here. Let me find it here. Okay. When we go back over here, we can see that. Oops, I don't want this one. I want to go to the. There we go. According to the Posttrib, they don't make a distinction between God's wrath as starting after the sixth seal. Instead, they just have God's wrath running the entire length, which, again, causes problems in defining when the wrath starts and when the rapture takes place, which is prior to the wrath, according to the basic understanding of the reading of Scripture, not least of which Paul picks up on when he says, God hath not appointed us to wrath. Okay, let's keep going. Post-trib, I also say, typically lacks a coherent explanation for this ingressive aorist and sometimes claims that wrath is either symbolic, meaning that God's judgments are present, but not in the form of distinct eschatological plagues, or punishments. I'm sorry, eschatological plagues or punishments. Let me read that again. Post-trib typically lacks a coherent explanation for this ingressive aorist. Remember, ingressive means beginning, as in initiation, starting at this point. Ingressive aorist. Aorist, by the way, basically just means defining something that happened in the past without focusing on the duration or the length. It's just focusing on what we call the definition of the action. It really did happen. Definitionally, it's factual that this thing happened. So that's why I say it's often interpreted as a simple past tense: has come, has arrived, or happened, or something like that, because it's a past tense statement of it's. So it's not a present tense. It's not a future tense. It's not a perfect tense either. It's an aorist tense, which literally means like without tense, aorist. However, ingressive introduces this concept of initiating something that arrived. So when we say it just now arrived, but it's the beginning of its arrival, or the beginning of its being realized by the people, even though it still has that sense of past. So you're like, is it beginning or is it ended? It's kind of working together when we say ingressive. So, post-tribbers say, no, the wrath here is symbolic. Symbolic of a judgment that is present, but not in the form of distinct eschatological plagues or punishments. Right? They kind of downplay the word wrath here. Or, if they don't treat it as symbolic, they do what's called backloading. And what this means is they claim that it happens in a final climactic burst, not throughout the trumpet and bowl judgments of Revelation 8 through 16. So 16 is where we read about the bowls, and they're saying, and by the way, chapter 8 is where we start introducing the trumpets. And so post-tribbers will often say, well, John is just describing the wrath that is already ongoing with the seals and the trumpets, but he's building to this climax of the bowl judgments, and those are really kind of the full weight of the wrath. I've even heard a post-tribber define the Greek word orge that we mentioned earlier as wrath, as saying this is defined as a fullness of God's wrath, right? A building up to a swelling point where God finally unleashes. And I want to tell you, by the way, that there is that theme in Scripture. There is a progressive sense of thematically the trumpets are the seals are bad. They're not really tribulation, but they're bad. I mean, they count as bad things to humans. And where they're bad, they're occurrences that destroy lives and property and scar up the earth a little bit in certain ways. But primarily they could be interpreted as that which is not God's wrath. But when we get to the trumpets, we definitely have God's wrath being introduced. That's textually, we have the word wrath finally being introduced in the book of Revelation. And then when we get to the bowl judgments, right? Let me go back to this one. When we have the seals, we have some bad stuff. When we get to the trumpets, it's worse. And then when we get to the bowls, it's the worst. That's my point. There is actually a progressive buildup of what is going on during the seals, trumpets, and bowls. So I don't deny that to the post-tribbers. I also agree with that. But at this point, again, by backloading, claiming everything happens in a final cataclysmic burst, they rob John's, I believe, purpose of describing the scroll that Jesus showed him, and that the seals are preconditions, and that the trumpets are distinct from the bowls, and yet there's 7 of each. All right. So my third bullet point here in this part. Thus, instead of wrath arriving at Revelation 6:17 like Prewrath proposes, Posttrib instead believes the wrath of God is better interpreted as occurring primarily at the very end of the 70th week, especially at what is usually referred to as the second coming itself, when Christ returns to destroy the beast and judge the nations destroy the nations. Compare from Revelation 19, 11 through 21. And then a few more bullet points. In the opinion of the Prewrath model, the post-trib treatment of wrath as a whole, however, creates a tension when they get to Revelation 6:17, where the people of earth recognize that, quote, the great day of God's wrath has come, end quote, implying per Prewrath that it begins at or shortly after the sign witnessed by the 6th seal. So you understand where I'm getting at here. I'm complaining that the post-tribbers don't treat what John writes here in Revelation 6:17 with the response from the earth dwellers using the form of the Greek word orge, which is just one of the forms of the word wrath that we find in the Bible. There's another word there that I can't remember, but just picking on the word orge for a second, if you do a search for in the book of Revelation, for instance, if I type in the word wrath, I'm using Blue Letter Bible's tool once more to show you how this particularly works. If I type in the word wrath and drop down to when the word wrath starts showing up in the book of Revelation, so I got to jump all the way here for a second, then skipping past all those Pauline writings and the book of Hebrews, when we get to the book of Revelation right here, then you can see, right, up here it's Hebrews, but then suddenly when we get to Revelation, the first occurrence of wrath is exactly where I said it was. Revelation 6:16. And they said to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the presence of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. This is the first time that John uses this Greek word orge, and I'll show it to you. Let me pull up the tools so we can see the interlinear and the morphological Greek New Testament. Chi, I'm sorry, I don't mean to read all the Greek, but when you scroll down into the interlinear tool, then we get all the way down to here, Strong's number 3709, and it's shows up as orges with the original word orge. In fact, if I click on the tool here, the inflected form is orges, and the root word is orge, right there, orge. So, going back to my objection, I think the post-tribbers are not paying close enough attention to what John is saying here and giving it the full weight of what appears to be what John's trying to demonstrate with these seals and the reaction of the earth dwellers, and that they're crying out, wow, the wrath of God has arrived, right? That's our aorist tense, has arrived or has come. But there's this ingressive sense to it in that it's the beginning of this wrath that has now finally arrived. Right? We've heard about this wrath of God, but now it's here. It's here. It has arrived. Okay, it's beginning. In other words, indeed, per Revelation chapter 8, that's the beginning of the outpouring of God's wrath. All right, let's keep going. Let me see. Do I want to? Yeah. Well, Prewrath critique of the post-trib view. I think I'm going to stop right there because the next part is a bit of a summary, starting to summarize and wind down. And No, I'm going to go over. Nope. I'm going to go over. If I don't conclude this part, then you're going to get lost, and I'll be ready for point number 4 next week. So if you guys are okay with it, I'm just going to keep going a little bit. All right. Prewrath critique of the post-trib view. Prewrathers argue that post-trib's explanation is incoherent or inconsistent for several reasons. So this represents a kind of a summary and conclusion. Number 1, if wrath begins only at the end, then why is it explicitly declared to have come in chapter 6? Right? That's kind of the point I keep pushing. And when I say to have come, that's based on the Greek translation of the word eilthen. Right? So you can look it up in other translations, and you're not going to translate it anywhere as is coming, or is about to come, or something to that effect. In fact, let me just do it for you. Let me look it up I didn't have this pulled up earlier, but I may as well do it now. Let's pull it up in a version in my other tool, my BibleHub.com, not BibleHub, my BibleHub.com. Let's pull up chapter 6, verse 17. All right, and I like this version because now I can just look at all the verses. Let's look at, this is probably about 30 different versions, so just bear with me. The great way of the wrath has come. All right, has come. NIV has come. NLT has come. ESV has come. Berean Standard has come. Berean Literal has come. King James is come. But either way, even if we don't say has come, when we say is come, that's just Old English for has come. Is come. It is here. It has arrived. No version has any variant that shows it other than the aorist tense. New King James has come. That's the proof that the New King James realized that the Old English of is come is a bit awkward, so clunky. So they, in their New King James version, they switched to modern English of saying has come. NASB has come. NASB 95 has come. NASB 97 or 77 has come. Legacy Standard has come. Amplified has come. Christian Standard has come. Holman Christian Standard has come. American ASV is come. In other words, kind of an old KJV version. Contemporary English has come. ERV is come. God's Word Translation has come. Good News Translation is here. International Standard Version has come. Net Bible has come. New Heart English Bible has come. Webster's Bible Translation is come. Weymouth New Testament has come. And then Majority Standard Bible has come. World English Bible has come. Literal Translations. Literal Standard Version has come. Berean Literal Bible has come. Young's Literal Translation come did the great, notice it just says come, because come did the great day of his anger, and who is able to stand. Smith's Literal has come. Catholic Translation, Dewey Rames is come. Catholic Public Domain Version has arrived. New American Bible has come. New Revised Standard Version has come. Lamsa Bible is come. Aramaic Bible in Plain English has come. New Testament Translations, Anderson's New Testament has come. Good God Be New Testament has come. Hawes, I think I'm saying that right. New Testament is come. Mace New Testament is come. Weymouth New Testament has come. World New Testament. Wrath came. Worsley New Testament is come. Additional translations, I didn't even click on those because I starting to get into, if I go down and look at them, start to get into some other languages or something, Berean, Holman. Okay, what's my point in reading through all of those? My point is that according to the aorist, it's better to just translate this as a simple kind of past tense. Has come or has arrived. So it's not a present tense. It's not a future tense. It's not a present, future, or perfect tense. It's none of those. It's a aorist tense. So I think I'm warranted by in our translation here, or my understanding as a pre-wrather. Number 2, if wrath is symbolic, like the post-tribbers often imagine, how do you account for the intense, literal, cosmic, and terrestrial judgments of the trumpets and the bowls, if wrath is simply symbolic, right? Number 3, if the Ingressive aorist truly does indicate the arrival of wrath at the sixth seal, like some scholars say, again, the word ingressive isn't built into this particular verse. It's only context. The aorist is like tofu. Whatever you cook it in, it takes on the flavor of whatever you're cooking it in. So aorist tense kind of does that as well. It's a simple past tense, but it takes on the flavor of whatever verbs are around it. So that there's kind of a nuance of either ingressive or non-ingressive or something like that. If the ingressive aorist truly does indicate the arrival of wrath at the sixth seal, then the rapture must occur just before God's wrath begins, which aligns with the pre-wrath model. Again, before the wrath is poured out, but according to classic post-tribbers, the tribulation is poured out, the wrath is poured out, and God's people go through all trib and all wrath. And therefore, rapture is not only post-trib, it's actually truly post-wrath, which contradicts other parts of the Bible as I see it. So I'm going to read, wow, didn't mean to jump like that. Let's try that again. I'm going to read the summary, and then we'll draw our study to a close, because we've been going over. Prewrathers argue that Revelation 6:17 signals the ingressive arrival of God's wrath. Quote, "For the great day of the wrath has come," end quote. So we're working from this Greek phrase, this Greek word, eilthen, in Revelation 6:17. The great day of the wrath has come, just that word alone. By the way, in case you are thinking in your head, Ariel, you're committing a fallacy of reductionism. What that means is it's a fallacy where you take all of your theology and you collapse it into not just one verse, but you collapse it into one word. And if that's what you think I'm doing, I'm not doing that. It just, maybe it looks like that. In other words, it's another variation of cherry picking, where you reduce all of your arguments into one verse. I'm not doing that. I'm simply highlighting one verse out of many, but I'm not hanging all of my theology on this one verse. Nope, far from it. Okay, in case you're thinking that in your head, nope, not doing that. So this verse, "For the great day of the wrath has come," which occurs after the cosmic disturbances of the sixth seal and prior to the trumpet and bowl judgments. So that's where I'm working from, larger context. This understanding that I am presenting to you, and I'm only showing you this one, hinges on the aorist verb eilthen, has come, being ingressive, marking the beginning of divine wrath. Again, for this argument to hold, I don't even need it to be in ingressive. It could be ingressive, but it doesn't have to be. I do already have the fact that it is aorist. That part I can hinge on. And the context of the seals being broken and the timing and sequencing of it being the sixth seal compared to the other five, or the other six, meaning the seventh one is about to be broken, and the narrative structure of John telling us what happens after the seventh seal and then the beginning of the trumpets gives me the context to build off of the fact that there's some ingressive narration going on. Excuse me. So that's what I mean by bringing in this discussion about the understanding of the ingressive aspect of this aorist verb, eilthen. The multitude in Revelation 7:14, again, I'm giving you the context now, is said to come out of the great tribulation, not out of God's wrath. We already read that. John asks the elder, where do these people come from? If they came out of tribulation and wrath, like the post-tribbers want to imagine that they do, right? Go back over to my chart. Where's the wrath? It occupies the entire 70th week. Where's the rapture? It's after the wrath/tribulation on this model, right? On this model. Now, of course, on the post-trib pre-wrath, right? We have rapture. Oops. Let's see. Let's mark this up too. We have rapture over here, but then in this one we have rapture plus day of the Lord. So this means day of the Lord in this version is a little bit different. So keep in mind that means all of this is tribulation that the saints go through as well. I don't have a problem going through tribulation. That's something that all believers are going to suffer, I believe. But going through rapture, going through day of the Lord activities, no, I don't believe we're going to do that. So, going through tribulation, coming out of tribulation, that makes sense to me. We go through it, therefore we come out of it. And so, we believe that God's, let me start there. The multitude in Revelation 7:14 is said to come out of the Great Tribulation, not God's wrath, affirming Prewrath's view that the church escapes the latter. In other words, we escape the wrath. In contrast, here's where my problem with post-tribs are. In contrast, post-tribulationists often struggle to explain this timing, sometimes treating the wrath as symbolic or backloaded, like we talked about earlier, occurring only at Christ's return in Revelation 19. Get it? The post-tribbers put their rapture, or second coming, at the very end of the 7th week. Some of them coincide it with the 7th trumpet, which is they call the last trumpet and the 7th trumpet are the same, which means, again, they've got... Either way, if they call it the 7th trumpet, that means that Christians went through the trumpets, which means they went through the wrath of God. So we still run into a problem. Whether they have it, the rapture, at their 7th trumpet and excuse Christians from going through the bowls, or they include Christians going through the bowls and just have it at the end of the 7th week, and so therefore they conflate trumpets with bowls and just call all of it wrath and just have a rapture at the far end. Either way, you still have Christians going through God's wrath, because John tells us, John starts using wrath language after the 6th seal, not after the 7th trumpet or something like that. Although, again, wrath is used for the trumpets and bowls, but not used for anything earlier than the 6th seal. So, post-tribulationists often struggle to explain this timing, sometimes treating the wrath as symbolic or backloaded, occurring only at Christ's return in Revelation 19. Prewrathers critique this as incoherent, since if wrath only begins at the end, Revelation 6:17's declaration would be premature, and symbolic interpretations fail to account for the literal judgments described. Understand where I'm going with that? Thus, Prewrathers contend that their framework better accounts for the sequence and nature of events described. So, post-tribbers, just admit that the Bible means what it says and says what it means. And the customary, ordinary sense of the word there, of the narrative, makes the best sense of John's describing things. He knows how to count, therefore he knows what sequences is, he knows what numbers are, he knows how to describe things in order, and besides, he's using a picture of a scroll, right? We looked at that scroll a moment ago. If we didn't have this scroll to work from, then we wouldn't really need to kind of hold to this idea that seals on the outside of a scroll prevent the contents from being accessed. But this, in John's day, was how they understood this scroll mechanism to work. The seals prevented the inside contents from being accessed or from being interacted with. For all intents and purposes, until you popped open the seals, the scroll was essentially inactive. It was shut down. It was not operational. It was useless to you. You couldn't do anything with the scroll until you popped open the seals. So why then, in the picture of Revelation, do we make the mistake of smashing and smearing together the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls as if they're all kind of recapitulating and saying the same thing just in different ways, and robbing it of its literal aspect of seals come first, trumpets come second, bowls come third. I mean, if you would have told that to John, he would have said, well, then why in the world did Jesus give me a picture of a scroll with seals on the outside? That in our day means that we can't read it yet until we pop open the scrolls. Today we don't use scrolls. You can hear some anger, some kind of emotion in my voice. Today we don't use scrolls, so I think we don't kind of appreciate the picture that Jesus is giving to John. Made sense to them. So we need to go back to John's day and go, what do the seals on top of a scroll mean to John? And that's the best way to understand the pictures of being painted. And I'm telling you that it needs to be kind of sequential. Do you understand why Jesus gave John a scroll picture? All right, let's close out tonight with two quotes, two Prewrathers. Alan Kurschner says, the wrath of God is not present during the seals. It begins with the seventh seal and first trumpet. Plain and simple. He has a blog at the particular link that you can see on this screen, that if I were to go to that particular blog, it's very helpful. The length of the blog link is right there. The aorist Greek verb eilthen has come in Revelation 6:17, implies that wrath is just now beginning, i.e. ingressive in quality, not already underway. That's what Alan Kurschner is trying to highlight. And then I've got another quote from Aaron Eggman. He says, quote, "The wrath of God begins immediately after the arrival language in Revelation 6:17, before the bowls." All right. The wrath of God begins immediately after the arrival language in Revelation 16, before the bowls. He's got a ... after 6:17, because he also means before the trumpet judgments, but he's just mentioning the bowls because the bowls take place near the very end of the week, where the post-tribbers try to locate their rapture. And that's from his book, The Saints Go Up and the Wrath Comes Down. All right, and that's it. I'm going to stop there with point number 3. I went over. I got technical. Rewind the video if you're not sure what I said. Go back and watch it again. Again, real quick, there are 2 things I want to mention, then I'll shut up and we'll close down the study. 1, if you want me to get more technical, I'll just scroll down and just kind of give you a peek. There is an excursus. What is ingressive aorist? And I go through it with a few charts and kind of talk about it. But if you don't want me to go through, if you want me to go through that, leave a comment under the video and just say excursus or something to that effect, right? Explain it, Ariel. If I don't get enough feedback under there, I'm not going to make a separate video on that. Number 2, last week, I should have said this at the beginning. I might just editorially put this at the very beginning. Last week, I talked about who will suffer the wrath of Antichrist in that day. As an overview, from a simplistic perspective, I believe that he's going to persecute Christians and Jews. When we get to Revelation chapter 12, specifically at the very end, verse 17, where John gets through talking about this woman that's going to be persecuted by the dragon, he mentions that this dragon's going to go off to make war with the rest of her offspring, and he qualifies them as those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. There are some differences in interpretation of what Revelation 12:17 is explaining, and we can get really technical with that, but I don't agree with the classic pre-trib position that separates those two descriptions of those who keep the commandments of God as referring only to Israel, and those who hold to the testimony of Jesus as referring to only to the church. I take it to be that that could be referring to the same group of people, meaning those who hold the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus, keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus, can be the same group of people. They are believers, they're believing Jews, primarily, first and foremost, but they also include just believing Christians, right? Remember, in the first century, the early church held to the commandments of God before there was this separation of kind of church and synagogue. So it wouldn't be unusual for John to describe Christians as keeping the commandments of God. It's only by today's standards that the Christian church largely sees herself as not under obligation to keep the commandments of God. But in the first century, within the first few hundred years, it wasn't unusual to see the remnant of Israel as included the church, meaning grafted into Israel, and being under obligation to keep the commandments of God, although not in any legalistic fashion. And the disciples didn't come out and tell them, hey, you need to keep the commandments. That would have presented some challenges to the way they understood their obligation. So instead they focused on faith in Jesus. But we can tell from other passages, and by Paul's own testimony by his very life, that when he says, imitate me as I imitate Messiah, Paul confessed to being a commandment keeper. Therefore, if he tells a church group, imitate me, this must imply keeping the commandments as well. Plus, commandment breaking would be frowned upon by Paul for any group, whether Jewish or Gentile. So he doesn't have to come right out and tell Gentile Christians, you guys need to be keeping the commandments, although there are passages that seem to be implying that and saying that in a kind of a less direct way. So bottom line is, differences in opinion between Revelation 12:17 might cause you to misunderstand what I'm saying when I say Antichrist is going to go after those who keep the commandments and those who hold to the testimony of Jesus. Generically speaking, in a broad sense, I believe he's going to go after Jews and Christians. He is going to turn on the Jews eventually, and obviously he's going to be against Christians from the word go, although he might appear to be friendly toward them, sympathetic toward them earlier on in the 7th week. Who knows? But either way, read your Bible and make sure you know what you know, because it's what the Bible says, not because it's what your denomination teaches you. Amen? Amen. And that'll do it for Eschatology, a biblical study of end-time events.